Hi everyone, I'm Anthony O'Flynn. It's been another hot day here on the Sunshine Coast, and the weather here is very, very hot for this time of the year, although it is obviously summer. And in this video, I'll be addressing one of the key topics for the awakening. Now, I have begun making a series of videos regarding the Australian collective soul, the Australian egregore, which I'm in the process of making. But I wanted to take time out from that to address one of the aspects that is key in current times to the Australian collective soul, and actually it's a relevant theme for many different nations around the world, and that is the anger that is building in various communities and various egregores around the awakening process that at a planetary level that is occurring, and how to navigate that, and also that this rage is basically a reflection of people becoming disillusioned with the state of their society, whether it's their state, their local community, or their entire country, particularly in terms of their attitude towards the government, the attitude towards the cost of living, the inflation crisis. Personally, I don't even like the term cost of living crisis. That's another branding by the propaganda machine to deflect from the truth that it's actually a mismanagement and an expansion of the money supply by the government, which is a direct cause of inflation, and is basically, as a result, there is more money chasing the same amount of goods and services, which reduces purchasing power. It's another topic for another video, but the theme is basically, disillusionment, frustration, anger, all these emotions that people are experiencing and intensifying day by day, at least here in Australia, with how people feel like the Australian way of living is sort of slipping away from them, and this Australian lifestyle that we've grown accustomed to is starting to fade out. And what's it going to be replaced by, which is not only an economic thing, there's many social issues there, political issues, environment issues, but the big one that's going to be affecting the collective next year will be, at least in part, will be the economic situation, which is by design actually. But there are many different levels to the awakening, and I am really going to be focusing on a more spiritual dimension in this video as to what that entails, as far as how do we integrate this information, how do we understand what's really going on, and what does this mean for the evolution of our soul, which is of primary significance, because the type of bombshells that are coming out with this IT database administrator Barry Young that's occurred this week in New Zealand, who has really dropped a bombshell on the statistics and the effects of the magic potion, and the batch numbers and all this sort of thing, as to the implications for this are much bigger and will expand over time at a global level. This one incident I'm referring to. But heading into 2024, the revelations are going to continue around this topic of the recent events this decade, and new ones that are coming to light already in the last couple of months with the situation in the Middle East, and moving forward to more local issues in 2024. And it's going to intensify, it's going to amplify, intensify, and the magnitude will increase, and the consistency will also increase next year. Now, I'll be detailing this more in my solstice energy update in December for the summer solstice here in Australia. And what this means for us at a spiritual dimension, because this is the last part of the awakening that I feel will occur, that most people are still in the beginning of this journey, which personally I have no problem with it. It's fine with me. This is a process we're undergoing. Evolution itself is a process. But when we think about that there is a section of the melting pot of what I refer to as the awakening process, or the awakening community, and I detail this in my my book that I've written, and one of this in this model, which is obviously a model, so it's not perfect. But what I'm referring to here is, in this video, is the truther community, which is really focusing on activisms, what's commonly referred to as the freedom movement, the truther community. If you know what those terms mean, you know what I'm talking about. I won't elaborate further. But what the real issue here is I'm talking about is not the actual events that are unfolding. It's how we can use those as a vehicle for our true awakening, for our true evolution, which it's not really in the conversation of these things yet, but I feel that it will become stronger as we move forward into the second half, particularly this decade and beyond. So the experience of reality is what I'm talking about here, that there's many really noble souls that are feeling called to speak out about the injustices around the world that are occurring or have occurred in the past, and to shed a light on this, to get this out to the wider community, which of course is completely ignored by the propaganda media, which is nothing more than state propaganda at this point, state and corporate propaganda. And even Mussolini defined the merging of state and corporate powers as fascism. So, but what I'm talking about here is that what is our experience of that? Because a really big learning point for the truther community in terms of soul growth is our relationship to this information. Because what is the quality of consciousness that we bring to this information? And it's really, I wanted to read this quote by Nietzsche to begin to explore this, because it really does define this idea of what it means to look into the dark crevices of consciousness on this planet, and to understand the total satanic qualities that many of our so-called leaders possess. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. And that's a quote by Nietzsche. And really what it's referring to is that if you are not conscious, if you're not bringing the light of consciousness to your actions, and you are all consumed by fighting the darkness, then if you are not conscious, then ultimately you will become the darkness, and you will become what you are fighting. Perhaps unwillingly, definitely unconsciously, but you will become what you are actually trying to fight. Perhaps not in the same way that your conduct is the same, but your consciousness is perhaps, at least in part, the same. And that is that you are consumed by hatred or fear or anger. Now, the qualities of all of these emotions we have all experienced at some point in the last few years, with the outrage of the injustices and the abuse of office, the abuse of power, all these things. So I am not trying to come from a place that, you know, myself or anyone should try to conquer these emotions 100%, because it's not really the correct attitude, but to start to become conscious of the quality of our own emotions, our own state of consciousness we bring to becoming an activist or a truther or speaking out. Because there are examples of people who have actually fallen by the wayside, who are very well-meaning, but they are consumed with this anger, which is really a byproduct of fear, an expression of fear. And the other issue with that is that this anger that is present in the truth community, is it divine anger, is it warranted, and so on? That's not really what I'm referring to here. It's that it means that we are not able to perceive or to be a truther or an activist and bring this light of consciousness into the actions that we're bringing forward, this information we're bringing forward, because ultimately the information is objective. And when a lot of people say, oh, this person's being really negative, it's really negative, that's actually a reflection of their experience of reality, not the person who's bringing it forward. So for example, there's people who are active on social media bringing this information forward, and other people are judging them by their own consciousness, saying that these people are being negative or so on. Well, the truth is not negative. It's objective, and objective facts are empowering. And this is the problem that many people are having, is that they're not wanting to actually look in to see what's really going on, because it is inconvenient. It does trigger their own emotions of fear and so on. But the point is here is that it's a subjective experience. So many of the people who are involved in this subculture, it was still a subculture at this point, are not necessarily experiencing fear. Actually, they're experiencing the opposite. They're experiencing courage. And what they're doing is actually empowering them. And then it's even merging into states of the heart, actually, of being selfless, of this idea of self-abnegation or self-sacrifice. Whereas people who are shying away from this are actually more embodying a state of fear, because they're too afraid to look into the truth, because of what they'll find, because of how it will change their worldview, how it will change their belief systems, and so on. So this issue is extremely relevant for the awakening, because many people are still sitting on the sidelines, not wanting to know about these issues and topics. This thing is only going to spread like in concentric circles. You know, there's no time frame or tangible, linear, day-by-day thing, but it's happening in a chaotic way, in the sense that it's not happening a little bit each day. There's some bombshells dropped that's happened this week that really help to expand and give this information more credibility, more endurance, and more irrefutable facts. And facts are irrefutable. Your opinion of facts is separate to the facts themselves, and that's what people need to understand. So there's a perceived negativity by many people who might not be aware that it's their own negativity. Similarly, many people in the awakening community are using their experience of truth as a form of projection. So there is anger in a certain person, and they're using this experience or this fact or this event as a way to experience their own anger in the world. So this is basically serving a projection. So we're seeing in the world what is in ourself. Now, again, this is subjective, because we could be seeing the truth of what's occurring in the world and not be in a state of fear or anger, but be in a more neutral, balanced state. But at the current state of many people in the awakening community is they are in a state of anger, outrage, frustration, and so on. Now, I don't personally, I look at the bigger picture in regard to this, because I can see that this is a journey of evolution that many people are experiencing, and particularly the events of 2020 and even before and after and so on, are simply a vehicle for their own evolution, to grow into become more accepting of reality, more detached. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't speak out either, because this polarity is basically revealing itself, that other people on the other side of the polarity don't want to know about any of these problems, think that everything's negative and so on. A lot of this is embodying the qualities of spiritual bypassing, and some people in the kind of classical spiritual community think they're so detached. Well, let's see if you're so detached when some of these catastrophes or something, or illnesses hit your family or you personally. Let's see how detached you are then, because you cannot solve a problem until you become aware of it. And this is the whole point of the initial phases of the truth community, whether it's, according in my book at least, it's dating back to, there's some cockatoos making some noise out there. And, the official modern day truth community started post 9/11 basically. So the point here is that how are you experiencing these things, and are you actually afraid to look into the truth? Because this spiritual bypassing, particularly characteristic of the New Age community, is particularly dangerous. We can never solve the global challenges that face us, until we actually are prepared to confront them, that we're prepared to face them and look into them and become empowered. And so in some ways, this is another form of fear. It's actually willful ignorance really at this stage, that people choose to ignore what is happening in the world. And this particular phase also is very much in limited time, because this whole issue of this rage building in the community, in my view, it's going to go global next year, at least, with many of the major challenges to the US dollar, the demise of the US dollar, the demise of the US economy, and the demise of the Anglo-American Empire. I mean, the interest rates for the US debt now is getting close to $1 trillion alone on the interest payments alone. So it's a system in terminal, permanent, irreversible decline, and this will have a profound global effect. In my view, it's actually going to be much bigger than the pandemic in some aspects. It's going to be have longer term consequences than many aspects of the pandemic, depending how you define that and so on. So, is this a projection? Like, are we using the injustices of the world to experience our own anger? And this is an unconscious projection in these blind spots that we have. And so our challenge is to understand that, and to understand our emotional quality when we are experiencing this in terms of the various events that are occurring literally day by day now. So our path is to become more loving, more understanding of the divine plan. Now, that doesn't mean not having our voice, not getting involved, participating in the political process legally, lawfully, and so on. And I'll speak more about this because at a recent event I had, someone asked me a very good question, which I'll make a video out of next. I actually answer this question very briefly in my book, but I should expand on it in another video. That should we just observe what is happening? This paradigm is failing. Should we just stand back and let it collapse and just basically observe and watch? Or should we get involved in finding our voice, in participating in our local community, and even at a planetary level, in whatever way we feel called, in a positive way? And my answer to that is both, actually. And I'll explain why in a different video. But in my view, this paradigm is collapsing. It's collapsing in real time, day by day. It is impossible to stop this collapsing occurring. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't participate in bringing the light of consciousness, so we can learn not to repeat these things again. But that saying, history doesn't repeat, but it definitely rhymes, is very relevant with this. So that's really everything I wanted to cover in this video. But I just want to conclude by saying that how you're experiencing reality is subjective. There are people who are very much able to look at the events, what would be called the conspiracy, whatever you want to call it, the truth activist moment, that are emotionally unaffected by it compared to some other people, because they have more of a neutral state. It's not cold, it's not closed in the heart, but they understand that knowledge is power, that when you become aware of what's occurring, then you can start to take action to counter it in a positive way. Otherwise, you are just cannon fodder for these globalists. And that is really the state of people that's becoming clear, that people are now still choosing to be willfully ignorant about a whole range of issues that are so relevant to them, and they cannot see how that's this relevancy, how it is oncoming, and it's oncoming very quickly. And yet the claim is simultaneously made by them that if you are speaking out about these things, then you are being negative and so on. Well, you know, the whole cliched hypothetical situation of, if someone warns you about an oncoming car crash, are they being negative? The answer is obvious, and yet people can't perceive this. And part of it is this inertia in the human soul. It's this tamasic quality that people are not wanting to very small numbers of people in the global population at this point understand what's happening globally. I mean, I wrote this book to try to get people sort of forewarned and to prepare for the massive changes that's occurring. And the spiritual preparation is the single most important of all, and that will be the last thing that we collectively address. And I really feel that at this stage, very few people are prepared spiritually for this. I'm not saying I am got all the boxes ticked either, but the focus is still on the doom in the awakening community. It's not solution orientated yet, and also perpetuating their own fear, their own anxiety, their own anger, and using the truth of community as a vehicle, as a projection. And this is a really big point, that this subculture that I showed in the diagram in my book earlier will grow radically from this decade. When this realization hits home that wow, this is relevant for me, this is a theme for me in my soul growth, then we're going to start to see a radical spiritual awakening of that subculture, of that soul group. I think we're still a few years off that, but I think it's definitely coming. And this quote by Nietzsche is so relevant, because if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. So it's very relevant for all of us, and it's very relevant for the current times we're in and the times that are coming, that we understand who we are and who we want to be in this whole situation, and to become conscious of our anger, and perhaps to still be engaged in this conversation, but to bring the light of consciousness to these themes, to these topics, to how we move and navigate through this shift. So that's everything for now. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. We live in epic times.